My name is Jeff Thielman, and I'm the chair of the Arlington High School Building Committee. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's forum, and I want to start by inviting members of the committee to stand up and just briefly introduce yourselves. Just say your names. So stand on up. Go ahead, Dr. Bodie. Go. All right, thanks very much. I want to thank everyone on the committee for serving, and throughout the evening you can ask questions of the members of the committee, and if we don't get to your questions, there'll be time after the presentation and the meeting to talk to the members of the committee about any questions you might have. We have two goals this evening. The first is to give you a project update, and the second is to share some site design ideas that the architects are developing. After each presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. And we'll pass around mics, and you'll get a chance to ask questions, and we'll answer them to the best of our ability. The project update portion of the forum will give you an overview of where we are in the process, including the reasons why the committee chose to build a new school. During this part of the meeting, we will discuss the current cost estimates of the project, and Jim Burrows, who represents the owner's project manager, Skanska, will provide some financial information for you. The second part of the meeting, which is scheduled to last 1 hour and begin by 8 o'clock, will be a chance to learn more about the site, including program opportunities on the front green and other outdoor spaces. Lori Coles of HMFH Architects will lead this part of the meeting. The forum will conclude by 9 p.m. At the next forum on October 24th, the architects will present various exterior designs for the new facility, and we know many in the community are eager for that discussion. The design team has been working on various exterior alternatives, which the building committee will see at our meetings on October 2nd and October 16th. We will also be organizing tours of the building, followed by meetings with the architect and design team for town meeting members sometime in the fall. We'll have a forum on November 27th and another one in late January or early February. It is important to begin our conversation by reminding everyone how unique the Arlington High School facility is. The building houses 4 separate programs: a high school for 1,390 to 1,400 students, the town's preschool called Monotony Preschool with just under 100 children, the Lab Collaborative, which is a partnership with Lexington, Burlington, Bedford, and Belmont to provide holistic special education services to children, and the town's thriving community education program. The Lab Collaborative occupies 4 classrooms at Arlington High School, plus a lunch area and a quiet space. Federal and state laws mandate that the town provide preschool services to children with learning disabilities, and those children represent about half of the Monotony preschool population. It is worth noting that students from Arlington High School work in the preschool as part of their child study course. The costs of building the preschool and lab spaces are partly reimbursable by the Massachusetts School Building Authority. In addition, the town comptroller's office, the facilities department, district offices, and the town's payroll department are located at the high school. The town is working on a plan to move the comptroller's office to Town Hall and the facilities office to the renovated Department of Public Works complex. HMFH is currently performing an analysis to determine if the town can retrofit the Parmenter School so it can serve as a space for district administration and payroll. The town manager also is studying whether it is possible to move the payroll department to Town Hall. There are costs to taxpayers for all of this work if it takes place and is possible. We are building on a complicated site. The high school campus is a little more than 22 acres, while the MSBA target is that a high school should be located on a property with a minimum of 25 acres. We do not have all of the space we would like. The building committee studied other locations in town for the high school, but not surprisingly, the next largest parcel in town with available space is about 16 acres. There are gas and chromium contaminants throughout the site, which we have capped with clean soil, asphalt, and the buildings, and these areas require testing twice per year. The third area of complexity for this site is that the Department of Public Works, or DPW, occupies space to the west of the high school. The DPW facility is undergoing a renovation that impacts the high school rebuild project. Our architects, HMFH, are in regular communication with the DPW design team. In recent weeks, there have been many discussions about the Arlington High School building project. This is entirely appropriate given its scope and cost. The conversations many in town are having about costs, about the site, the front lawn, parking, traffic, the school's original buildings and its facade, and whether the committee should have voted to build a new building or do a renovation addition are identical to the discussions the building committee has had over the past 18 months. I find it reassuring that people across Arlington and the building committee are wrestling with the same questions. Everyone in this room and on the committee appreciates how passionate people are about Arlington, about our schools, and certainly about our kids. Our passion for education in Arlington aligns perfectly with the mandate of the Massachusetts School Building Authority to build a high school that meets the educational vision Arlington has for its students. Since late 2016, almost 2 years ago, the building committee has met on average twice per month, held public forums, conducted surveys, and engaged with hundreds of people at Town Day and in other venues. One thing is very clear to us is that Arlington is united in a collective desire to create a better educational space for our high school students as soon as we possibly can. We are a short 9 months away from a likely townwide vote on a brand new high school. So let me take a few minutes to refresh everyone's memory about how we got to this moment. We formally began this journey in April of 2015 when the town submitted a Statement of Interest, or SOI, to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, indicating that we wanted to partner with the state to study ways we can improve our high school facility. This was our second Statement of Interest submission. We submitted the SOI because the high school has multiple inadequate classrooms, science labs, and an inadequate technology infrastructure, which affect the overall learning environment for our students. Arlington High School is a collection of buildings constructed in different eras, with a less than desirable and confusing layout. The building just does not work as a 21st century high school. In fact, our accrediting agency, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, or NEASC, put the high school on warning status for our facilities in 2013, a point we noted in our Statement of Interest submission. In May of 2016, the MSBA invited the town into the eligibility period. And in September of 2016, the town formed the building committee. In late 2017, in partnership with the MSBA, we selected Skanska as our owner's project manager and HMFH Architects as our project designer. In January and February of 2018, our academic leadership developed an educational plan, which formed the basis of the design alternatives developed by HMFH last spring. The educational plan was developed through a highly collaborative process that involves school faculty, community members, and parents who came together to envision a high school that Arlington will need for decades to come. The school principal, Dr. Janger, worked with the faculty to write the educational plan, which covers all aspects of the high school experience and dictates the spaces that will be included in the new building. MSBA board members had high praise for the resulting plan, and I encourage you to go to our website to read it. What is more exciting than the plan is the educational vision behind it. The vision addresses the student experience at Arlington High School and how it will change with a brand new facility. The top priority, or a top priority, is that the building be welcoming, accessible, and easy to navigate, which is not the case today. The space itself will be conducive to supporting the social and emotional health of our students. This is very important in an era in which student anxiety is on the rise. A large central learning commons, which people my age call a library, will allow research, study, and collaborative group work that is essential to 21st century careers. Students will get hands-on experience in STEM, STEAM, science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics, and makerspaces. All classes will be better able to do project-based and personalized learning, and the vision calls for up-to-date technology to be woven seamlessly into the building. Students will have access to outstanding art and music instruction as they do now. By creating an environment where teacher interaction is encouraged, the new school will foster the development of interdisciplinary courses and instruction. The many different kinds of new spaces, gathering, display, breakout, and performance, all support a more collaborative and innovative approach to learning. Finally, the space will be sustainable and flexible. It will support Arlington's vision of the school as a hub of learning, activity, and engagement for our students and the community, not just for now, but also well into the future. The educational vision is exciting and speaks to the aspirations and hopes we have for our students and for our entire town. In April of 2018, our design team concluded that the option of only renovating Arlington High School would not meet the educational plan, nor would it accommodate expected enrollment growth. This left us with two options: build a new school or do a renovation addition. Between April and June, the building committee met multiple times to learn about various design alternatives. We shared these alternatives with the community and we solicited feedback. Building committee members listened to one another, to the community, and to the design team. Based on the community forums we held and the feedback we collected, we knew that it was impossible to select a design that everyone in Arlington would embrace. But the committee had to make a choice. After carefully weighing the trade-offs of all of the options, the committee chose Alternative 3A, a new facility, and we are enthusiastic about the potential this alternative has for Arlington students. The committee engaged in a very public and careful voting process. On June 19th, we took a straw poll, and the vast majority of the committee supported Alternative 3A, the design we ultimately chose. On June 26, 2018, the committee took two votes. We took a vote in which members ranked their first, second, third, and fourth choices. The first choice for nearly all members was Alternative 3A. Then, by MSBA rules, we took a roll call vote that night with only one member voting for a renovation addition, which would have extended to the front lawn. No one supported Alternative 1, which would have retained the entire front lawn and parking areas. That alternative meant we would be without an auditorium for 2 years, and then we would be without a gym for 2 years. At last week's meeting, a member of the building committee felt it was important to reaffirm our decision, and thus made a motion to reopen the design process. Several members of the committee explained why they chose alternative 3A, including some who spoke about how their thinking evolved over the process. After the discussion, the committee voted unanimously against the motion. We chose alternative 3A because it meets the educational plan, avoids a potentially costly and much higher risk renovation of buildings constructed in 1914 and 1938, responds to community desires for a new facility, retains some of the green, and minimizes student disruption and modular costs. Alternative 3A is less expensive than the design renovation options, and it provides the best path to a net zero facility, one in which the energy used by the building is roughly equal to the amount of renewable energy created by the site. As you will learn in the second part of tonight's forum, alternative 3A provides a more accessible use of green space for students and teachers to gather, learn, and build community. The diagrams you have seen so far are not a design. They are massing concepts. We are at the beginning of the schematic design phase. HMFH will design the look and feel of the building and the whole campus with enough detail to establish a much more precise scope, budget, and schedule than we had at the end of the feasibility study. The architects will create a more attractive facility than the boxes you have seen so far, and the community will have numerous opportunities to weigh in on the multiple aspects of the building, including green space, exterior facade, and interior features. The schematic design schedule calls for the town to sign a project scope and budget agreement with the MSBA in April of 2019, a vote by town meeting in May of 2019, and a debt exclusion vote by the town's voters this coming June. If the vote is successful, the MSBA will authorize the town and the design team to complete the design documents and develop a construction schedule. We realize that many people have a fondness for the current look of Arlington High School. It has an attractive facade and front green. For those who want to preserve the look and feel of the building, we ask that you give the architects time tonight to talk about their plans for the front lawn and green spaces. We also invite you to future meetings to see the exterior designs as they are developing. We charge the architects with creating at least one design that honors the look of the current high school, as well as designs that reuse physical elements of the current building. HMFH will present exterior design alternatives to the community at the forum on October 24th. I would like to address the important issue of cost. The town-based early budget ranges, which were included in the owner's project manager and designer request for services proposals on comparative data from other projects. The early numbers did not contemplate the complexities and unique features of our site, nor did they consider our educational plan because it wasn't written yet. The current estimate of a $308 million project is a big and even shocking number. Let me be clear that the building committee views this as the high water mark in the process and recognizes that the taxpayers of Arlington need to feel that the cost represents a valuable and necessary investment. So why is the current estimate so high, and what are we doing about it? The non-educational functions I mentioned earlier are one major factor. The MSBA process required us to include every possible space in our proposal. We can pare the project down after MSBA approval at the conclusion of the feasibility study stage, but we cannot add more space to the project in the phase we're in now. So until there is a clear plan for where various town administrative functions can be housed, we have provided for all of them in the current cost estimates. Another factor is that the MSBA has a strict formula for the space a high school needs, including art, theater, athletic space, classrooms, and science labs. The MSBA approved a school of 1,755 students, and their template projects a certain number of classrooms and other spaces based on that enrollment number. Because of the educational plan, which drives this whole process, the building committee directed the architects to design a school that included spaces beyond the MSBA template. Specifically, the design calls for 6 larger classrooms, 2 additional science labs, 16,500 gross feet of physical education space, a performing arts center with as many seats as we currently have, more art and music space, and a larger library commons, because the educational plan calls for it to be the heart of the school. The building committee strongly favors these additional spaces because we feel they are necessary to keep Arlington High School as one of the top-ranked secondary schools in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We expect to have many conversations within the building committee and with the community about the value of these additional spaces and costs. Some of these areas are ones that the MSBA template caps, but the building committee feels we need larger spaces given our projected enrollment. For example, under the MSBA formula, the auditorium is equal to 2/3 of the enrollment of the school, but it's capped at 750 seats. The current auditorium holds 900 people, and we want the new auditorium to have at least 900 seats. In addition, the main gym is capped at 12,000 square feet plus 3,000 square feet of additional workout space, and our physical education proposal is larger. The building committee and the MSBA will carefully scrutinize the budget for this project. MSBA staff, who have access to data from all of the building projects in the state, will review every cost of the final design. They will examine what the design team cost estimators develop, compare it to the market and their experience, and ensure that the town and state spend every dollar wisely. The finance team in the town manager's office will review expenses as well, and our owner's project manager will monitor and work to contain costs during and after construction. Before I turn this over to Jim Burrows of Skanska, let me leave you with a few thoughts. This committee wants to work with everyone in the community to build a great high school. We do not want to delay the process or further increase costs. To do so, we have to keep a few things in mind. First, as our committee has learned, no one who engages in this process authentically and honestly can approach it with simple solutions. Building a new high school on a site with limited space, contamination throughout it, and students on the property while we build is complex. Secondly, the work we are doing, like everything we do in the field of education, is humbling. I think everyone on the committee is humbled by the task of building a school that will be used by young people who have yet to be born. Thirdly, the constraints and trade-offs involved in this huge project mean that everyone will have something in the final design that they wish could be different. Finally, the educational plan and vision is what is guiding the design and development of the new Arlington High School. We are very proud of the educational plan Dr. Janger and his staff and community members wrote for Arlington High School. And we need the community's support and participation to ensure that we can incorporate the guiding principles of the plan into the final design of the new school. So thank you for listening to that long speech. I'm going to now turn the podium over to Jim Burrows of Skanska. He'll talk for a bit, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Jeff. All set. So my name is Jim Burrows. I'm with Skanska. I'm the owner's project manager. So just a quick description of what we do. We basically manage the process as a whole. We manage the MSBA, the architects, all the way through close out of the project. So as Jeff said, we're going to go into some of the cost information. I know there's been a lot of information out there. We just want to clarify a few things. So firstly, the construction timeline. I think that's key for how we develop the estimates. They have to be escalated, which means project costs, construction costs increase over time. So I wanted to start with, this is basically what we're driving towards. This is the current timeline. A caveat I would put on this is that we did an initial phasing. However, when we bring a construction manager or contractor on, they will review our current phasing and scheduling. So this is subject to change. This was our first pass through, so that within the estimates, we could estimate how much escalation to carry in the estimates. So roughly, it would be July of 2020. So as Jeff said, we'd have the vote, a little better than a year of design. And then the first phase would be 18 months. That would be building on the front green. Next phase would be 18 months, and we would essentially work our way around the building. Last phase would be 14 months, and then roughly 8 months at the end. So as of September 2024, the building would be 100% complete. Another key point of this is that you would have, at January of 2022, you would have 2 new wings. So it's not a, September 2024 is the first time any students are in new buildings. We would be populating the new buildings as we work our way around the site. So the prescribed estimating process of the MSBA basically runs through, as Jeff touched on, you start with the educational program, which populates your space summary, which gives you your square footages. And so that's where you start. So that's step one, and that was part of the preliminary design program estimate, which was in the range of 287 million. Actually, those should be switched. It was 285 million to 333 million. Now, the progression of this, what we added on the left is unknowns and ambiguities, that as you go through this process, when you start, obviously there are a lot of unknowns as far as your existing site, as far as your what your educational program is going to be. And then as you work your way through the estimating process, those start to minimize. So at the PDP stage, we had 8 options. We priced all of them. They also have you do, as Jeff mentioned, a base repair and renovation, which is not adding any square footage, just renovating the existing building. So at that stage, again, the range was between 285 and 333 million, and they selected 4 options. And that moved to the next phase, which was what was submitted to the MSBA in April. And that range was the 287 to 311 million. Now, that, as Jeff said, at this stage, you want that to be your high water mark of your budget. Because what we're driving towards at the end of schematic design, which we just began in August and we will be submitting in April, is that a project scope and budget with the MSBA, and that is your budget for your project. So with that in mind, from the start of the PDP estimates, the PSR estimates, we tasked the estimators with ensuring that we have, if there's any unknowns, any ambiguities, we have contingencies, we have budgets for data we don't have, for information we don't have. So that's the $308 million price tag that we have right now. That has a lot of money in there for unknowns and ambiguities. So as we go through the schematic design process and we start to finalize facade features, we get more data on soils on the site, we get more of a finalized design. Those ambiguities and unknowns shrink, so we're able to get more down to realer numbers for some of those items. So at schematic design, you develop a project scope and budget with the MSBA. At that point, the town has 121 days to approve funding. That would be the vote. And then after that, there's a year plus of design work. So during that process, so at the end of schematic, you have your project scope and budget, your detailed design begins. And that's not the last check. There's not just one estimate. There's actually 4 rounds of estimates in the detailed design. So that's a constant check on your budget. As the design is developed, you're ensuring that you're staying on your budget that you've agreed with the MSBA. So next, this is a slide. So as Jeff mentioned, there are spaces that are outside the MSBA requirements. So this is a brief breakdown of your 308. Of that, your core class is your core high school. Now that is your standard high school is 218 million. And of that, the additional spaces, the auditorium spaces, the gym spaces that Jeff was mentioning, is roughly 22 million. Now, these numbers, again, are from the PSR estimate. So as we get to schematic design estimate, these numbers are going to, again, are going to become real numbers. Additionally, so of that, so 240 million is for the core high school. So with that, all the additional spaces that he was mentioning that we did include within our PSR and PDP submissions, is roughly 67 million. So there was a range that we mentioned in the last building committee of 70 to 90. Again, these are all rough square foot estimates. So that's how you get to your 308 million. Again, the estimating process is an iterative process. As the design develops, so do the budgets for the project. So I think with that said, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff.
So what we'll do now is, I want to thank you, Jim, for the presentation. I'm sure people have questions and may want to make comments. There are cards, do I have it correct? There are cards on your chairs. If you want to write a question, you can pass it around to members of the building committee and they'll collect them. If you want to ask a question, we're going to have members of the building committee. Kathy, you going to do it? Are you going to? Okay. We'll have some members of the building committee. Dan Ruiz, thank you, Dan, for volunteering. Appreciate that, Dan. And Frank, thank you, Frank. So we're going to have you pass around the microphone when people ask questions so we can answer their questions. Do you want to take the mic? Yeah, okay. So during this period of time, you ask questions or make comments, and we'll answer them. I may call on members of the building committee. We're going to stop this part of the presentation at 8 o'clock to begin the presentation. And if there's no questions, we'll go right to Lori Cole's presentation. And I do want to emphasize, just to reiterate what I said in my remarks, the educational plan is what is driving the bus here. And a lot of people work really hard on it. And if you read anything on that website, I've looked at other websites, look at it's most complicated. It's got more stuff on that website than any building project website in the state. If you look at that website, read the educational plan, or just read as much of it as you can. It's a great plan. It talks about what really happens at the high school, and that drives this whole thing. That drives this whole thing. It's more about the students in the school and the students who will go to the school than it is about any of us, I think. Okay, go ahead. Anybody want to raise your hand? No questions? We'll move on. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Jeff. Is this on?
It is.
Chris Loretti. I have a few questions related to cost, as you might imagine.
I expected that, Chris.
First, I'm glad to hear that other spaces are being looked at. I didn't hear the Central School, and as I understand it, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts recently gave up about 9,000 square feet of office space there. I'm wondering if that's being considered as a space for non-school activities or the school administration.
What's that? Yeah, I mean, here's the problem tonight, Chris. The town manager's at a conference in Baltimore, and he's the one that would have the best answer to that. We will ask the town manager the next meeting. I'm sorry, we don't have an answer to that tonight.
Okay, thanks. A couple others. I appreciate that chart that the gentleman put up before you with the costs of the different non-school spaces. Unfortunately, I couldn't read it back here.
Yeah.
But I wondered whether, in addition to the dollar figures, there's also some data on just what those spaces are being used for. So, for example, how many people in the comptroller's department? How many square feet for the IT department? Exactly what the specifics are about the space needs and the number of people served. My impression is this town is very, very generous with the amount of space it grants to town employees. And I think people need to understand that, particularly when they're looking at paying $742 per square foot. Also related to the cost, in some of the summaries that were put up previously, the total amount of the school that was not going to be paid for by MSBA was going to be used for the debt exclusion. And I would like to know if these non-school functions are also going to be part of the debt exclusion, or will they be funded out of the normal capital budget?
It'll be part of the debt exclusion.
Why is that? Because I suggest that for many of those things, if they were not part of the high school, when it came to providing new spaces or renovated spaces for those people, they would be funded out of the capital budget.
If they're going to be in the high school, if they're outside of the high school, they won't be funded by the debt exclusion. If they're inside the high school, if they're inside the physical building that is the high school, it'll be funded by a debt exclusion.
But is that an MSBA requirement, or is that a political decision the town has made?
It's an MSBA requirement.
That's not the impression I got from them, but we can talk about that later.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim. Am I wrong?
Yeah, the MSBA just doesn't participate.
Yeah, the MSBA doesn't participate, but we would. Okay.
Just one final question. In looking at both the construction cost and the total cost per square foot, it seems to me the soft costs are extremely high, and I'm wondering if someone could provide an explanation of that.
How about Jim? Jim.
Yeah, as I was mentioning, we do have healthy contingencies for some unknowns right now for soils, et cetera. So that's why the soft costs are where they are. I think as we develop the design and get more information through schematic, I think we'll start to see that number come to a real soft cost number.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Dr. Warden?
Thank you. Well, I have several questions, one of which is why, when the principal and teachers worked so hard on the educational plan, did you choose an option which was not the best, when you could have looked at various different parts of your plan to prioritize items so as to make the costs more equal for the best plan and the one you chose? That's my first question.
Well, we'll take that. Want to take it one at a time, so we'll forget it.
Pardon?
So we'll take it one at a time. Matt, you want to take the question from Dr. Warden?
Yeah. So
Can you take a mic so we can? Cable does. Cable needs. No.
all right. So the question was, why did we choose a plan that was not the best? Was that the question?
Educationally.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I guess what I would have to start with is the premise of that question, which is over time, when we started the plan, we had Project One, and we also had multiple other the simple answer to that was, by the time 3A got to where it was, that's not really a true statement anymore. If you looked at educational programming for Plan 1, which was initially the one that was really ranking the highest in terms of fitting the elements of the adjacency plan, as we kept on improving and working on the various different models, Plan 3, eventually in 3A, really achieved all of the same adjacencies, all of the same features at a much lower rate. So the honest truth was that in the end, Plan 3A really meets the educational program just as well, if not better, than Plan 1.
Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. I do not find that answer acceptable. I'll go on to my second question. Since the Building Committee knows that we are a Community Preservation Act community, why is it that you have chosen an option antithetical to the aspirations of Arlington voters, in that it violates two of the principles of the Community Preservation Act, the open space one and destroying the green space, and the preservation one, destroying the best buildings at Arlington High School, and one of the best buildings in the town. My question is that, in addition to these violations, there are other aspects which I would like to ask why they are not also being dealt with. For instance, the fact that you are dumping more paving on the Millbrook, which is something that should be perhaps opened up to give riparian education of ecosystems to our children by opening up a small exhibition space. We are currently spending a lot of money renovating the Wellington Park. Why are you not observing the proper geological education of our children in dumping loads of more blacktop on a two-way highway right on top of the Millbrook courts? I would like to have an answer to that question, please.
I don't really understand it. Laurie, you want to take a shot at that? Okay. Laurie Cole's our architect, could take a shot. We're going to talk about the site around the building, including transportation issues at 8 o'clock, but go ahead.
I think most know that the site is contaminated, and the Millbrook on our site is actually in a culvert. So it's not something we can just, literally, we cannot dig around and expose it any more than it already is, which is at the edges of our site. So they do have the opportunity at the eastern edge as a school to go out to the Millbrook, but we cannot open it up on our site.
Okay, I'm going to let you do one more question because there's other people raising.
Yes, one more question.
All right, last
Thank
one.
you.
Can I speak to a minute for the
Yeah, go
historical
ahead.
piece?
Thank you.
So, as far as the historical piece, one, I know that Dr. Bodie and Mr. Chapdelaine consulted with the Massachusetts Historical Commission. The buildings are not historically registered. And as a person who lives inside them, the front, which you see, is a beautiful old historic front. But the historic value of the interior of that building is all stuff that was built in the last 50 years. There's nothing really left. The only historically interesting features that are left within the current buildings, other than the facade, are the proscenium of Old Hall, one very nicely carved piece of wood as you enter into Fusco House, the original red floorboards of the pit, and that, I believe, is it. So the columns are beautiful, and I think a lot of people like them. But the other thing to note is you can actually stick your finger through them in many places. They are rotted out, as is the cupola. So even if we were to maintain them where they are, they would be largely reconstructed.
All right.
Maintenance is a separate problem. Okay, my last question right now is, I'm sure that your sustainability group, whatever the qualifications, are doing the best they can. But let me ask this question. What they have done has not been good enough. They clearly need to be educated about the benefits for green architecture, of preservation of superior buildings, buildings with good bones that can take many renovations. They have not been educated in the benefits of those buildings. Architects in the community have tried to help them understand what they are doing, but I would like to know why they have ignored the architects who have asked questions and asked for reports on their building studies and energy studies and have received no answers. Are there any answers or studies on the subject other than the chit-chat we just got?
Well, they're talking back at the principal, Matt. Yeah, I mean, the green, is there a question about green?
about green architecture and preservation of buildings related to that.
Ryan, do you want to talk about that a minute?
I'll take a shot. I'm chair of the Sustainability Subcommittee. I'm not entirely sure what the question is, but I think it might relate to the energy value of preserving buildings versus building new. Is that possibly what the question is about?
My question is...
Yeah, okay, Pat, I think we got the question. So you've had enough time.
So-
Ryan, answer the question, please.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, if that's the question, I would say all else equal, if you can preserve a building and reuse materials, then yes, you should do that. There were lots of things that went into the decision that we made in terms of the option that we chose. It does take time to pay back the embodied energy within materials if you don't reuse them. Most of the school is going to go anyway, as you saw from the choices that were made. So it's really about which pieces we can preserve, if we were able to preserve, and what would be essentially the comparison to an all-new building. We were really not in a position to do detailed analysis on that front going into this process. However,
my question is...
Pat, that's enough. You got to ask a lot of questions.
but an all-new building has a greater potential for energy efficiency, and we can design it so that it can maximize energy
No.
production. So, for
It does not have
example,
a greater...
for example, the roof of Fusco does not have. We have solar on the high school today. We looked at all the buildings and we put solar panels on the high school today. The roof of Fusco does not have solar on it because that roof was not suitable for solar. That's an example. So there's a lot of things that go into design choices around sustainability, maximizing energy efficiency, and so on. And I'm confident that we're going to build a building that is as energy efficient as possible by the end of this
Okay, I'm going to move on to someone else. Thank you very much for your questions.
You
Thank
need to be educated, Ryan.
Okay. Go ahead. Barbara Thornton, you had a question? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you convening this meeting here today, and I just want to stand up to say that I hope that as a community we can address this issue without it being terribly contentious. This is important for all of us. This town has looked forward to building a new high school for at least a decade or more, but what I would ask you, the building committee and the architects, to understand is that when we last, as a group, convened in this hall, it was, I believe, on June 4th, to look at a variety of different choices and to really think about what we cared about. And at that point, I know I left with a clear sense of, gee, I really care about that wonderful facade, that open space on the Mass Ave that I can walk by, etc. But that changed radically when we came back from summer vacation and we heard about all the work that the group had done. I want you to think about it from the outsider's perspective on what a surprise, sometimes shock, that was to us. And then I want to just bring up a very bad memory of my own, which is what happened in Wellesley a couple of years ago when a committee was tasked to work over the summer to come up with a new plan for having a town manager form of government. And it was so radically different from what the people had expected in June. When they came back in the fall, they voted it down, in my opinion, less on the merit of the proposal than on the fact of the shock. We all need to kind of calm down on the shock, remember that we're all here for the same reason and that we want this to go through, and that I hope that everybody on the building committee will listen to what people remember as the good ideas, and can we build them in for the schematic design and the final plan, and everybody that wasn't on the building committee or on the architecture team will also remember that there were some real costs that these guys crunched in 100 hours over the summer.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so I'm going to call. Yeah, go ahead. You can go. I don't know. Tell me your name. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name is Alham Sadat, and I had a question about how you got to the numbers around the 1,755. I was curious about how we got to that number and whether that number takes into account this year's kindergarten enrollments, which are quite a bit higher than the original projections were.
Yeah.
Just wanted you to comment and try to figure out how we got to that.
Kathy Bodekentakshi, do you want to take that? Talk about the...
Yes, we worked with MSBA on this issue. When we began the process, we were at a lower number, and we brought in a lot of data about where we are. We looked at our own analysis of a forecast. We looked at the McKibben analysis. Of course, we had our current enrollment. And the point that, yes, there's going to be a point when we're probably going to have more than 1,755 students in the building, but is that going to be, that higher number going to be sustained? And in terms of the forecast that we have, the answer is probably not. We're not going to come down to the level we are currently, but we are certainly not going to be on a straight linear path increasing well beyond that. So we feel comfortable that that number is doable. What it would mean is that we would have probably larger class sizes when that happened, but having this extra space that Jeff Dillman was referring to will probably make a very big difference in terms of the extra students that we will have at some point for a number of years. I don't know how many years, but it's certainly going to be able to be adequate to that.
Okay. Go ahead, you over there. You go ahead. The woman over there, I don't know your name.
Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Shea. I'm in a butter to the high school.
Yeah.
And first of all, I wanted to thank you and thank the committee. I have not been able to attend previous meetings, but the committee's work and the communication that you've done as a committee and your opportunities to provide feedback have been very much appreciated. So thank you very much. I live on Schuler Court, so I refer to it as the driveway to the high school.
Yep.
And of course, I'm really sad about the loss of the front space because I think of that as my front yard. But I'm willing to let it go. But I'm here, I just wanted to make a plea to the architects to really consider that street in the design, and especially in siting the school. For thinking about how the feel of that street, I'm very concerned that will become a sad little alley to the high school. So if you can think about that, and if I can ask the architects to think about that in the design and thinking about preserving some of that green space. Also, living on that street, I'm very aware of that street is so unsafe, especially, and I know that this has been considered in the design, so I just want to emphasize the way that the cars whip around the back of that school. So if that can be brought into the thoughts of the design process, that would be wonderful. And third, I'm noticing now that I'm realizing this build is going on, in another design consideration that I'd ask is the sound. After high school games, the sound on that street is so loud. So if there's going to be building, if you can think about how the sound reverberates off of the building, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay,
so thank you very much.
Thank you. Carl?
And thanks for the opportunity for speaking.
Yep, thank you. Carl, do you want to? Do we have a mic? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Carl Wagner. I'm a town meeting member, and I wanted to ask a question to the building committee, but first of all, I wanted to ask, there's a lot of people here, not everybody wants to talk. How many of you came out because you're concerned about losing the open space or the facades, by show of hands? So there are some people here who are concerned. I found, as we've been I'm part of a group called AHS, Save Our Historic Arlington High School. There's a website, you can Google it. We've found that a lot of people who are not in the school system or don't have kids in the school system don't know this is happening at this cost. And I think the more that those people find out, the more this project is going to have a big, big problem when it passes the people who pay for this project, the town meeting members, and then the voters. So I'm pleased that people are here, and I'm pleased that a lot of them are concerned, but I'm also aware that there are a lot of parents who are saying, This group is slowing the process down. I was told by a member of the committee that I was slowing them down $100,000 a month. And then last Monday, you told us that I was slowing you down, we were slowing you down $800,000 a month. So I wanted to just talk, first of all, to this group and then ask my question to you and say, these group of people, about 300 plus now that just found out about this project, didn't come late to the project decision. As soon as June 26th came and we found out that option 3 was chosen over what we believe is the democratic vote by their own surveys to go with a preservation choice, we rose up, we wrote to the MSBA, we're asking them to change. The other thing I wanted to address is the fact that my kid just graduated from a great school, but you're looking at me and you're saying, you don't have a kid in the school system. Well, I graduated from Arlington High in '87. I'm a townie, but I came back like some of the young parents did here, and my kid just graduated and had a great experience. And there are parents among us who feel we can do the future as well as protecting the past, the open spaces, the facades. So I hope you won't see anybody who's criticizing this group and this plan currently as trying to slow down Arlington Public Schools or coming late to the game. Anyway, I have some questions for the building committee, if I may ask them. The first one that I hear as I talk to businesses on Mass Ave, Mill Street, and Grove Street that'll be dramatically affected by the traffic problem that you'll hear about later in the evening is, oh my goodness, what does this mean for an average business? We've heard that it means $800 plus for 20 or 30 years for an average house on top of your existing taxes. Can somebody tell me what it means for an average business in Arlington?
In terms of property taxes?
In terms of additional property taxes, yes,
I don't.
please.
Would anyone have that answer? No, they're not. We don't have that answer. Next.
I asked the assessor, and the assessor wouldn't tell me because they don't have an estimate. We're using the number on our website and on our flyers, we have them after the meeting if you're interested, of $827 per average house worth $655,000. 827, we think it's 30 years, but it might be 20. Please correct us if we're wrong. We're trying to use facts here. I've heard people use character assassination to say we're not talking facts and we're not being honest. We are trying to be honest. We think the 17-member committee is doing a great job in trying to do the right thing, but we think that option 3A has gone the wrong direction. And my next question, my last question, because others want to speak, is to ask, and this is trying to support these people, trying to support getting this high school rebuilt. Will you consider, between now and October 24th, dramatically changing this project so that the town meeting members who meet in this August and old building will actually say yes by 2/3 vote? Will you consider changing that process so that you reincorporate the drop-off and miss the traffic mess, you reincorporate the grass with its memorials, and you reincorporate parts of the facade?
Well, okay, Carl, we had this discussion last week in the building committee meeting that you attended, and I opened the meeting to let everyone on the committee speak and respond to your questions. And then as I explained in my remarks, there was a vote not to do that. So that's the vote we took.
All right.
And that's where we stand. I want to make a few comments. I thank you for your kind words, Carl. We did not choose alternative 1, the facade. It's a more expensive option. It takes longer. It puts us in a situation in which we don't have an auditorium for 2 years. We don't have a gym for 2 years. We move students to all sorts of different places. We determined it wasn't in the best educational interest of our students. The other thing, Dr. Janger and other people made comments about the strength of the columns. And that was something else that we considered. We also have had the experience in the town of Arlington with renovation projects that have gone way over budget, been very costly. And the town manager, John Cole, people who have worked on those renovation projects, were very wary of doing a renovation of an existing building. And so we made the choice we made. The answer, as I said to you the other night, anybody in the committee who wants to make a motion can make a motion. The motion was made. It didn't succeed. If the motion were adopted, we would not be having a June vote. That wouldn't happen. That can't happen. And the project 1, alternative 1, takes a year longer than the other projects. So then I realize your daughter's out of the school now, and so but there are people in the town for whom that's a really important thing. The other thing I want to talk about, the surveys. Yeah, there were lots of people in the room on June 4th who were passionate about the current facade. But then the online surveys, and there's been some, I'm not on the Facebook page, so I don't know about all that stuff, but I've been sent certain things, and there's been a back and forth about the meaning of the numbers, but there were quite a few people who chose alternative one, and I had half a dozen people approach me on Town Day who told us not to go back on our decision. Now, we don't make decisions as a building committee, and no one designs anything by plebiscite. You just don't do that. So we appreciate it. We hope that all of us can come together for the kids of Arlington. I'll also say one thing about town meeting. You know, lots of people have said, well, you're never going to get 2/3 at town meeting. Well, in my opinion, it should go to the voters and they should decide. I think that's the most important thing. The voters should have the final say, and all of us should live with what the voters decide, and I think we're going to go from there. It is 8 o'clock. I have promised the designers the chance to speak, and so I'm going to give Lori Coles the floor and let you guys take it from here. Thanks very much.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm just going to do a brief overview of what the design process is. We've been asked that a lot. Not everyone has been through a design process. Probably many of you have maybe done your kitchens over at home, but the full design process is pretty lengthy, and there's a lot of opportunity for input. The diagram here in these cute little bubbles sort of shows that we have completed one of those bubbles so far. There's a lot of time and a lot of work to go into the design of this building. We have completed one stage. We are just starting, 3 weeks ago, the second stage called Schematic Design. So I'm trying to show that to you all so that hopefully there's some comfort and understanding that there is a lengthy design process, and that during that time, we will be having more meetings like this, continue to meet with the building committee, continue to meet with the faculty and staff at the high school, the users of this building, that help us to inform how this building will work its best possible way to educate the students. So I think I will leave the scheduled part of this behind because I think Jim did a good job of showing how long this schedule will be. This diagram here is really about the process in terms of, we always use the word, it's iterative. Meaning we produce something, we get feedback, we go back to the drawing board, we evolve what we've done, we come back, we talk to more people, and that continues, again, all the way through the stages. So you may have heard horror stories of other designs or other experiences you've had. We are not the design firm that comes in with a sketch and says, this is what you have, period, done, never to be talked about again. It's not how we operate. It's not how we will operate here. When all is said and done, the Arlington High School will be an Arlington building. It will feel like one, it will be welcoming, it will be exactly what you all will think, geez, this is exactly what it should be. And that is our goal, is to make as many people happy as possible. And I do agree with Jeff, in the world that we live in, we are never going to make everyone 100% happy, but our goal is to achieve a building that meets the educational needs, is as cost effective as we possibly can make it, is energy efficient for the future and the length of this building, and how long it's going to be here, another 100 years, and really is a pride and joy and a civic building for this community. So, you know, these are just words that we use a lot of time about collecting information and creating things and getting that feedback. And that's really my brief presentation about what the design process is, but it's pretty lengthy and we have a long time together. So this next slide is a diagram of the site layout as we have it today. And what you're seeing here, if I draw this red line a few times, that is the line of the existing front of the high school, okay? So We are proposing a building that is built in the front. This front portion here is the first phase. I think you've heard it talked about tonight. When that is built, we are able to move a large portion of the school. It's a 4-story classroom wing, and it's all of your performing arts. And when we do that, we're then able to build the second phase, which is this wing here, which is called the Humanities Wing. It's 5 stories, and it will also include the learning commons and the cafeteria. And once that is built, we are able to build the third and final phase, which is the new athletics spaces. All the while, the red gym, which is out here, and Downs, which is over here, are available as we need them throughout the phases. But you can see all of this space will now be given back to field and to on-site circulation. That will be much better than what you have now. What you have now is not on-site circulation. It's a little bit death-defying going around that turn. I've done it sometimes thinking, I really shouldn't do this, but I have to get to the other side. And so I was really, I'm not sure if the woman who's still here who lives on Schuler Court, but we would love to spend more time talking to you about your experience and your space. Because our goal is to make the circulation on the site very easy, navigable, with sidewalks, with space for 2 lanes of traffic, so that it's a fluid, flowing site, not something you get trapped in and wish you never turned onto the site, which is what happens now. So we are, in fact, proposing that the front green remains a green, and there aren't cars on the front green. That's a big change. It's a big change. And with that, we are working with traffic engineers, we are working with TAC here in town, fire, police, and the DPW to talk about how this site will work and flow. So this is the initial diagram, this is the proposed, this is what we're working towards, but we want to hear from all the professionals in town to ensure that what we're proposing will work successfully. And really what we're proposing in general is to get as much traffic off of the surrounding streets and onto the site in a fluid manner that would ease traffic elsewhere, not create additional congestion. We're talking about a population that's very similar to what we have now. We'll have more high school students, but we're hoping to eliminate some of the adults, I say that politely, some of the other departments, which will eliminate cars and that type of traffic. So I'm not saying it's a one-to-one, but basically we are dealing with a very complicated site today, and you've been dealing with it for decades. Our goal is to make it better. So we are looking at ways to break up the parking on the site. And by that, if you do remember from back in June, one of that diagrams really had almost a contiguous parking all along the back. And with talking with the school administration, their goal is to create a more easy access from the school to the fields and not have to go through a parking lot. So we're looking at a couple different scenarios of breaking up the parking to the west. You already have parking and sort of improving that layout from what is there now to the east, and then having another subset of parking here. The other mode of transportation that we're trying to enhance is the walking and bicycle connection. We've talked about this in the past here. The idea of providing an accessible path off of the Minuteman bike path and therefore a connection to Summer Street. So again, the goal to make it easier to get on and off the site in the different modes of transportation is our goal. As you know, it's a very big, deep town block, and trying to penetrate that block from as many different directions as we can has been a goal of the committee. So the other piece of this is, and I'm not going to say too much about it because that really is the main part of our presentation and I don't want to shortchange it, but the idea that the mature trees in the front green remain, but that we are actually creating other green, open spaces that are more contiguous and connected to the school so that the educators can comfortably send those kids out and use that space, which is not what happens now. So it's more of a production to get out to the front green, and there isn't anything there. it's grass, but that's all that's there. Our goal is to create educational spaces for the students and teachers to use. I don't know that I'm going to say too much more. I think there probably will be questions, but we can come back to the slide when the questions come up. I'm going to turn this over to our landscape architect, Deneen Crosby of Crosby, Schlesinger, and Smallridge in Boston. And this is that pointer. And then this is moving forward if you just want to do your own.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So this slide just illustrates the various kinds of open spaces that we're going to be designing and developing as part of this project. Lori talked a little bit about them, but there's the green along Mass Ave. We know there's a lot of interest and concern. There are two courtyards, one that's associated with the auditorium space and one that's associated with classroom space. There's an entrance to the building in the back. And we're also looking at some other, so there's an entrance here, but we're also looking at some other uses for this purple area. We call it the back porch. There is a play area, preschool, associated with the preschool, and then a series of fields, sports and recreational fields. So starting with the green along Mass Ave. I think some of what's most memorable to people about the existing green is certainly its size. It's a very big green lawn along Mass Ave. I think the trees, there's some beautiful oaks, some also beautiful other variety of different canopy trees there. A lot of them are at the back. The building setback, the building is pretty far back off the street right now, so you have kind of a feeling of space as you walk by. And the memorials, someone mentioned the memorials earlier. So looking at the trees, with this scheme, we are able to preserve anything along the Mass Ave corridor, and you see some photographs of those trees here. You can see that there's kind of a big empty lawn area between and then the existing trees along the existing building. The size of the green is about 2/3 the size of the existing green now, and it wraps the building. I think one nice aspect of this that Lori spoke to is that there is a direct connection between the building and the green, so you get the sense that the building is sitting in the green rather than separated by a roadway, and the length along Mass Ave will be about the same. One thing that happens, and so you can see that these are the trees that can remain, these are the existing trees. You see that the building will have more of a presence on the street. You're certainly going to see the facade of the new building, so that's going to feel different. But it's set back in that diagram that we showed, it's set back about 80 feet from this wing, so it's still substantial. In fact, the green here is still the largest green. I think that the Robbins Library green is at about 57,000 square feet, and this one is 60-something, 61. And looking at it, looking east, you can see again that the trees along the edge we're able to preserve, but the building is moving more towards the street. And our thought about this space is that it should still have kind of the overall character of a canopied green area. So we are interested in preserving trees. And then on the ground plane, there will certainly be paths, you know, something more substantial at the entrance. Some precedent photos, again, kind of a canopied green space, pathways, and something more substantial at the entrance. There are a number of memorials, most if not all are in the existing green, and we have a process for this. First we survey and document everything. We try to understand, is there anything in particular that we should know about this memorials or something important about the setting that might not immediately be apparent to us. Then we discuss and review with the client, the town, with other people that are involved, and we consider and show options for how to incorporate them. One of the courtyards we call the outdoor amphitheater. This is the one that's associated with the auditorium space, and we call it the amphitheater because of its shape. It's pretty sizable. It's about 3/4, if you're familiar with the long courtyard within the school now, it's about 3/4 of the size of that, or double the size of the cafeteria courtyard. And excuse me, this is just a diagram of how it might be set up with a stage or kind of a focus for the space at this end, maybe some seating. There's a whole zone along the drive that could be treated in different ways. And some precedent images of a stage and seating oriented toward the stage, step seating built into a landscape, covered seating. The idea that there might be some outdoor workspaces, some desk space incorporated with seating. This is showing an outdoor movie theater. This space could be available for community events as well as school use. Food trucks, there's a drive there. They could be there for an event, and certainly lighting could be incorporated to extend its use. The second courtyard is the outdoor classroom courtyard here. And I wanted to show this diagram first because it's to help kind of understand how that courtyard works. There is a service loading area that's accessible from the back of the school, and you would drive under here, and that would be decked over. And that's about 5 feet lower than the upper part of the courtyard, which is flush with the floor elevation of the building. So there's very good indoor-outdoor relationship all along this edge. To give you an idea of the size of that courtyard, the existing Enviro garden space, we know that that's one of the likely program elements for this. So 1/4 of that space is about 2 times the size of what the school has now. Or it's about, I'm not sure if this is right. I'm gonna move on. The space on the other side, the continuous space that's over the delivery area, that is about 3/4 of the long courtyard. So this is a pretty big area. And these are some very early sketches. You know, we've thought about, you know, is there a way to unify both sort of the top and the bottom level by containing seating areas or gardens? Another possibility is, you know, do we want to take advantage of that change in grade and kind of incorporate seating into that element with a patio space outside? We know that there are maker spaces in the building, so you could have patios that relate to the inside of the building here. This is in the ground, so the garden could be in the lawn, and then flexible tables and outdoor learning spaces. Some precedent images showing the contained gardens, Enviro garden, possibly the kind of seating that could be worked into a grade change, and the relationship between maker spaces and outdoor patio spaces that are available here. And we're looking forward to working with the science curriculum to find out exactly what these eco-garden spaces are and what can be studied. Maker spaces have this, we will have this relationship of the inside and outside being flush. There can be the kinds of doors that just can stay open and you can work inside and outside. These are some precedent images. In the rear of the building, there's also a building entrance here, but it's going to be, it could be an outdoor lunch time space. There's plenty of room there for movable furniture, if that's desirable, or for building seating into planters. It can be permanent seating. There might be space for herbs or something having to do with the culinary program. And the play area associated with the preschool different options for what those play experiences can be, more natural play, more structures. It will be screened in some way from a drive, so this is actually using the screen as a play element. And then the recreational athletic fields will be looking at orientation and what the program of those fields should be. Lori spoke to this connection to the Minuteman bike path. This is a pretty steep slope on the side of the bike path. So if we were to do this, it's likely that some of it would be a structured connection, but you'd be able to come off the bike path and enter the school or go to the fields or go elsewhere. This is just an example of, this is a structured bike ped path that we did recently that actually starts out as a path and goes up and over railroad tracks and comes down on the other side. So some of it might be something like this. And you might actually be able to stop there and look at a game going on the fields. And the architectural elements, the possible reuse of architectural elements, the archway and the columns, just some really quick, again, sketches. You know, the columns could be used at the edges of courtyards to define the courtyards. It could be used in that place that I told you where the grade steps down in the divided courtyard. And some examples where architectural elements have been used largely to define spaces, but they very much become kind of a character of the space. They're very memorable. That's it.
So we're going to open it up for questions, and these are questions about the exterior, the design. Go ahead. Do I have someone to help me? All right, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mark Kepline. I haven't heard anything yet about parking spaces. So how many are there now and how many are planned? And when zoning rules are changing around town to decrease parking spaces for new construction, are you following the town's ideology there? Also, is the building heated with fossil fuel?
In terms of parking spaces, so the current site has 205 parking spaces. And the decision to date with the building committee is for 250 parking spaces. So we are increasing the quantity of parking spaces. If you're going to ask, is that going to serve every single person that goes onto the site? It won't. And so it's a little bit of a trade-off between having to pave much of the site, including your fields, or you know, the negotiations that happen on the neighboring streets. So that's where we're at with parking right now for the quantity. And then the other question was, about the fuels. So, you know, it would be gas. So what gas would be coming into the building. And again, the sustainability subcommittee is really looking at how, you know, in the future, maybe as early as 10 or 15 years from now, we're not relying on fossil fuels at all.
Okay. Do you have programs now to encourage staff to use bicycles in public transportation or shuttle buses and car sharing?
Where's the other microphone? I'm going to take a microphone. Okay. Oh, yeah. Answer the question. Good. Yeah, Matt, thank you.
Only that we live in a walkable town and that we have lots of bike racks, but otherwise, no.
So no charging for parking or compensation for people taking the bus?
But we will be planning for electric cars on the site as far as charging going forward. What? Can we get the microphones, David, over there? Or there's some more people with their hands up back there, David, for next time.
Grant Cook. In the traffic studies you guys talked about, I think it was 2 meetings ago, So the engineer talked a lot about a bolus of traffic coming in. I mean, the site's still going to be surrounded by Mill, Summer, Grove, Mass Ave. That's not changing. So do you see any particular hiccups? Right now, cars can come in on the front. Cars will come in the back next time. Inflows and outflows, do you see any particular challenges that you guys are still wrestling with feasibility, trying to make that bolus of time from, like, what is it, 7:30 to 8:30 manageable?
Right. So what he's referring to is the peak. The peak time is AM. Yes, there's traffic after school, but it's really the peak of the traffic happens in the AM. And so that's when that's the period of time. It's about 45 minutes of the day that we're focusing on. So again, our report and analysis has all gone to TAC. We're waiting to hear back from them and getting some input. At this point, our goal is looking at people being able to arrive either from Schuler Court or from Millbrook and pass through the site. Drop off is the entire length of the back of the site. I mean, we may click back to the site plan if that helps. And I'll let those guys do it. And the analysis says if we're going to do that, that in fact the connection from Millbrook Drive to Mill Street is already a poor intersection. And so any additional traffic to that, the proposal would be to provide a traffic light at that intersection. And you already have a traffic light at the Schuler Court intersection.
There's a question for the principal. I think so, yeah. So, you all set, Grant? Yeah, the question for the principal is, can you compare the difference between the use of the front green now for students and faculty versus the use and the option just described? I think I got it.
So the honest truth, and I will say that I was probably the last and strongest proponent of the front green and the columns, but people kept repeating to me that it's really underutilized and not particularly programmed for. And the honest truth is that on warm days in the spring, 1 or 2 classes may go out there for a break and throw around a Frisbee or talk, but because it's not set up for classroom spaces, not enclosed in a way that's usable, it's really not very heavily used. Actually, the Enviro Garden, which is a completely inaccessible pit that can only be accessed through a tunnel up through the auto shop and up a ramp and through a halfway door, is more heavily used than the front green for educational purposes. So the contrast is that in this space, I cannot say how excited I am about the idea of having that amphitheater space out there as something that the band will use, that we can use for activities during the day. The classes can go out and use for classroom spaces, and that I certainly envision using in any warm month of the year for gatherings in the evening. One of the things we don't have in Arlington right now is good evening events for students. Our school is not very good for those other than athletics because you can get into the whole building once you're in there, and so it's very hard for us to supervise. But I can certainly imagine, as many communities do, having concerts and movies and readings and plays in that space with food. And I apologize to the woman who lives right across the street, but it'll be really nice. You'll come over and we'll let you eat for free at the food trucks. So that's really exciting. And then moving the Enviro Garden up into a space right outside. The idea is to move the maker space into that large courtyard where we could have the homecoming dance, there could be outdoor classrooms, the Enviro Garden would have ponds and food and other sorts of things that are being grown out there. So there's lots of exciting uses for that space that we really can't do out on the front lawn. And so I am really excited. And one of the things we've also talked about is they are open to the ends. So I do think that although they're not going to be seen from Mass Ave, I hope that we find ways to make those accessible as part of community education and for other community activities.
There's people with hands up behind you guys.
Hi, my name is Wendy Richter, and I'm a member of the Open Space Committee. I had 2 questions. One was, are you considering, I'm sure you're considering it, but it didn't seem obvious to me, the solar orientation of those courtyards, and are you considering any roof gardens? Because it seemed like both the courtyards are on the, there's a tall building to the north of them, so they're not going to get as much sun as they might. The other question sort of piggybacks on what you were talking about. about the traffic, and it seems like where we have 2 drop-off and pickups, we are going to go down to 1. And how is that going to be addressed? And I would hope in the next presentation, or if you could do it tonight, to show us how the traffic is going to come in and go out, all in the back. So that was.
So the question about green space, and you're right, the solar orientation is ideal for the classrooms and for the indoor spaces, but the buildings will cast some shadow into the courtyard spaces. Although I have to say I've been amazed by how much natural light gets into that big north courtyard, which has a 6-story building right in front of it to its south. So we'll be doing shadow studies and making sure that wherever we do want things to, the plants and the herb garden and things like that will be appropriately situated. We are also planning for a green roof located right at that central spine above the library, accessed from the 4th floor. And so that will be another opportunity for outdoor space for the students. And the other question regarding traffic, again, it is being analyzed. I don't know if the group wants to go back to that. Can you go back? We'll go back to the plan, if that helps. So, I mean, the analysis is looking at how people get there. So we currently have, I'm not going to have all the numbers right off the top of my head, but there's a high percentage that take the MBTA, and then an even higher percentage that walk. And so when you take all of those out, you're looking at the drop-offs, the parent drop-offs of about 30% of the traffic that comes, that comes on the site. This is negating teachers who come and park, and they're done. They're not part of this, the heavy flow. So we're looking at that, and again, the having sort of that full length. The full length of the back of the site. So we'll still have a drop-off here for preschool, and then the full length of the back of the site will be drop-off. It is, it's longer in some respects. It's okay. Than the front, but it also adds that piece at the back too. So there's still sort of 2 different zones. They're just all flowing through the site, and that's our goal. But again, we'll have further analysis and be able to talk more about it each time we get more information and talk with more of the departments.
Hi, Laura Notman. I'm a 17-year resident and the parent of a junior right now. I wanted to piggyback on that comment a little bit. I hope that for the next meeting that you can have some section drawings and shadow studies of those courtyard spaces to really understand how they'll be useful and when they'll get light. And I'm sure that's part of your design process, but it would be really nice to share that as part of the design presentation. And I want to commend the landscape work that's been done, which I think is very thoughtful. But I'm also concerned about the loss of the lawn, which is not solely a high school space. This is a community space, and I think your comment, which was a little inadvertent, you said, there really isn't anything there. And to me, that's the point of open space, is that there's nothing there. And people said about this entire country when they came and settled it, there's nothing here, let's just cut down all the trees, let's just, take all the wildlife. So this is an important space to the town, and I voted for option 3B, but I think there's about 50% less green space in this plan than there was in the option that we looked at and voted for. It's really kind of crept forward. And from your presentation of the process, it seems to me the reason we've got a building plucked right in the middle there has everything to do with logistics, the face of the existing building, where you're building the addition, the first phase. And so I would like you to really work hard in this schematic phase to figure out how to preserve as much open space in our open space as possible, and really push back a little bit on this idea that, right now that building is plunked right in the middle of the green. So when you talk about the green is now building. And in order to kind of win the hearts and minds of people here in Arlington, we have to have a credible space that relates the building to the community and makes the high school something that we all feel connected to, because the spaces on the side will be great educationally, and I can see they're being really well developed, but it's not the same as having a really open space. And we can't have a great new high school without giving up something, but we shouldn't have to give up everything in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Lori, I heard Jeff say earlier that you're going to be asked to design an alternative scheme for incorporating some of the historic facade or building into 3A. Is that true?
Facade, not the building.
Facade, okay. Can you talk a little bit about the design philosophy? What are your guiding principles behind how you would start to illustrate whether this is a postmodern building, whether this is a neoclassical building, how do you compose your design to make it integrated into either the current historic scheme of the buildings as it rests on the site with elevation changes, et cetera, or are you going to do something Bauhaus type?
So I appreciate your question, Ron, and I know it's a very important topic for everybody, but tonight's forum is about the site, and we're not prepared to talk about the elevations. We have nothing to show, so I think that you're prepping me for the next forum. Thanks, Ron. I don't know who's got.
Hi, Barbara Farina. I want to let you know that I'm an architect. I have 3 children. I have 3 children. One's in the system now. The other just graduated. When I first moved here, I was really taken by the wonderful open space there and the sort of New England appearance and character of the high school. And then I had the opportunity to go in, and I thought, oh my God, this place is a disaster inside. So I'm very supportive of rebuilding it. I wish it had happened a little earlier for us. But the part of it that I want to talk about is, again, the site. Arlington has no common like Cambridge and Bedford and Winchester and a lot of our towns we consider peers. It's organized along a corridor. You know, Mass Ave cuts right through the middle of it. There's not a sort of a common or center that's clearly identifiable. We have Robbins, but that's a walled garden. And I think the high school is a reference point in Mass Ave that acts as sort of, oh, I'm in Arlington. And I think the building has, I was hoping that we'd save the green space and maybe not the actual columns, but recreate that sort of identity that it had. And when I look at this scheme, you're calling them green spaces, but to me, they're sort of like little edges that have greenery in them. You're not going to get that sense of, I'm here, I've arrived, I'm in Arlington. The other things that I'm concerned about with the site plan are the courtyards. They're small, and when you talk about 4- and 5-story buildings, again, in our climate, they're going to be in shadow. They're going to be maybe nice in the summer, but we have a lot of winter in front of us. And the other thing that I'm concerned about is I'm not sure where the front door is anymore. I'm thinking that with the car access and all the goodies in the back that we've actually turned the street address to not be on Mass Ave. It's actually at the back. And when I think of the other towns, I spent a lot of time at their high schools. Their high schools are not their main street. I'm thinking about Belmont and Cambridge and Woburn and Winchester. They're sort of tucked off on the side. Belmont, too. It's not their sort of identity. It's not on their main street. So I'm hoping that you will really work hard to make sure that this high school preserves that sort of identity that it is for Arlington. I know it's going to have great spaces inside, but that you'll also try and infuse it with that New England character, which Arlington doesn't have a common. So we have to sort of hope that we can preserve some of these that we have now that act as one.
Thank you.
Thank you. John Worden, Precinct 8, town meeting member. Couple of questions about the open space. I think you've heard that people in the crowd are more concerned about the size and shape and aspects of the open space than people on the building committee. It struck me that you say, well, there's going to be almost as much or something. It struck me if you had a jigsaw puzzle that depicted, say, a lovely garden or a handsome building like the ones you want to tear down, or a beautiful actress from the movie world, and then you took the jigsaw puzzle and threw it on the floor, said, well, look, you've got just as much picture right there. It's just kind of scattered here and there. Well, that really doesn't do it. The space, as has been pointed out, is a large, important, it's kind of like a common. Well, people aren't there all the time. Well, you could move that garden the fellow was talking about. That could be out in front just as well as wherever it is. It's an interesting point that way back in the early 19th century, a citizen of this town gave the town a big piece of land to be a common. And the town sort of let it drift and neglected it. And back around 1950, they said, we got a great idea. Let's pave it over for a parking lot. And that's the one behind St. Agnes School. So this is what we've got left. The other point I wanted to make, and somebody said you're going to heat this building with gas. Is that what you said?
Gas would be the fuel service. Yes.
Gas. You know, if you've seen any newspapers in the past week or so, some people up in Lawrence, Andover, North Andover don't think gas is such a great idea. I can't believe you say you're going to put up this modern, state-of-the-art, environmentally responsible building, et cetera, et cetera. You're not using geothermal.
We will have geothermal. I was asked what service was coming into the building, and it would be gas. But we will be looking into geothermal and photovoltaic, neither of which will be 100% enough for the building. So we will have gas coming into the building. That's what I was answering.
Well, all right. I don't know why that should be the case. It seems we're going in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Okay. Didn't get any questions.
Hello? Oh, yeah. Thanks for your presentation. I wanted to thank everybody on the committee. I know a handful of you. I know it's a lot of work. And you can probably, at times, you might be looking around and why am I on this committee and spending all this time? But I really appreciate all of your work. I also want to appreciate the people in this room, Carl and Mr. Warden who just spoke, because I think at the end of the day, it's going to lead to a better building and a better process. A quick anecdote. So I have a son at the Gibbs, and just as a kudos to the school committee, that is a huge success in my mind, being able to keep that building. It was a tough decision for the community, get that building back. Wasn't easy. It's a beautiful building, was renovated, and a real success. I also have two kids at the Ottoson, so it's sort of a win-win. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that project, but we took back a school, renovated it, made new space in the middle school. So there's smart people in this town, on the school committee, on committees like this, and results like that are great. The reason I bring up the Gibbs is you walk in there, high ceilings, right? There are 12-foot high ceilings in there, lots of windows. You wouldn't be able to get that in a new building. You walk in there and you see the junior high east in the archway. I mean, that's so neat to have my son as a student there being repurposing an old building. So going forward, I appreciate your presentation on the landscape, some very good comments by the architect over here about the site in general. I mean, I think just talking to my friends and talking to people in the community that the building needs to get a lot cheaper. And Jeff and the person from Skanska acknowledge that there's wiggle room in these numbers, but the 70 to 90 million for non-academic uses, that's a huge number. And I think if the vote was tomorrow, a lot of people who hadn't been to a lot of these meetings would say, well, I'm not going to pay for that. I also think that the building, I understand with the net zero, and I'm conflicted about the plan because there's lots of things that I love about it, but I think in a way it does need to get more sustainable. And if, while you're investigating the facades, you can think about repurposing elements of the older buildings. I think if this plan said, okay, we're going to have a 85% new building, we're going to keep Fusco because it's a great old building with good bones, and we're going to keep Column House and repurpose it. I was pretty excited at earlier meetings when you talked about the double story in Column House and entering and being able to open that up. I thought that would be, and being able to see that when you enter the building, I thought that was hopefully where things were going. So if this plan had kept those elements within the building and it was repurposing them while still having a largely new building, I think that would be great and would get a lot of people to vote for it. So I don't know, I think that if with a close eye on cost, sustainability, and historic preservation, those are the, in terms of people I've talked to in the community, like those three areas need to keep going in the right direction or go more in the right direction to get this to pass. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Stamps. I moved here after my kids were out of school, so I've never been fortunate enough to have my kids attend Arlington High School. But what I do remember from when I first moved into town 8 years ago was driving down Mass Ave, which was a pretty kind of a confusing drive for me. And I always loved going by the high school with the huge sweep of the lawn and that beautiful building, and it was a majestic view. And I still feel that way today. And the school building committee's done a fantastic job, and I can barely even begin to appreciate all the educational benefits the kids are going to get out of so many of the innovations. But I would like to echo what many have said about trying to keep that majestic view. There was something said about, well, we don't use that space. Well, we don't really use Spy Pond either, that incredible water space. People look at it. That is a form of use. It's having the view. Views are priceless. And if that goes away, that's gone. And we have so few vistas in Arlington, and that is one right in the center of town. You don't even have to go down to a pond or over to a park to see this beautiful vista as you drive through our great town. So I would really urge you to try to think of some way to preserve that vista and make it even better. And the second thing I wanted to say quickly, as a member of the tree committee, is just want to make sure that the trees, the incredible trees that are there, whatever you choose to keep, which we hope you keep all of them, are preserved, their roots are protected really well. We've had some problems in town with trees dying, you know, because even though it seemed like they were protected, there was really work going on too close to the roots and such. And I would hope that you would consult closely with the tree warden on how to protect all the trees. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, Steve Liggett. Whoa.
Steve Liggett, Precinct 9 town meeting member, resident for 25 years, 24 years. I want to start first with a comment, and that is that my memory of the June 4th meeting here, if it was actually that date, it was sometime then, is that the predominant support for the green space was coming from the citizens of the town. They were appreciating the view, they were appreciating the ability to stroll through the green, and I love that. That's amazing and awesome, and I like the way it looks, and I love everything about it. The majority of the clapping tonight is about, let's reclaim that green space. We don't like to cover it up with this educational building. Now, the principle that I heard from Jeff, and I believe to be the case, is that the driving factor, the most important factor, is to build a school for our children. I appreciate that the citizens of the town want a green space. I do too, and I want it to be sustainable. This is a hard problem. The number of constraints facing the design committee here is incredible. They've come up with the compromise that people who've been thinking about this a lot harder than the rest of us have. And I don't mean to offend anyone, but really, they've been thinking about this a lot, much more than we have. So yeah, we have opinions, but they're not necessarily informed opinions across the full spectrum of the factors that matter. So I really encourage all of us to consider, fundamentally, this is a school that is going to be here serving our children, and through them, us, improving the values, the property values of our town for the next 50 to 100 years, because we have a top-notch school. So let's not lose sight of that because we enjoy the vistas, which I do, but when something's got to give, let's put the priority on the future and our children.
Thank you.
Somebody on that side? Go ahead.
I'm Alan Jones, and people probably know I'm a money guy. I'm on the finance committee. I just an observation. How many architects are here? I keep seeing architects. I know Ron, Chris, my wife said it. I've never seen a project that had so much interest from the architects, so you could have a lot of help. But seriously, I want to, the people I've talked to in the building committee and the school committee, I want to throw a little fear into the process. We all want a great educational program, and the educational program seems really good. I love the idea of maker spaces and STEM, but it doesn't work if we don't pass the debt exclusion. And the debt exclusion, first of all, is going to be pretty massive sticker shock, whether it's 200 or 250 or 300 or 350. People are going to look at their tax bills, and it may be right on the same ballot with an override. So it's not going to be easy. We don't need to lose any votes. I think what we want to avoid is to have 100 people in front of the high school 2 weeks before the vote carrying signs to save it. We're going to lose the vote. So I just want to emphasize, going back to whatever flexibility we have at this point in the design stage without going back to day one. But I think there's still a lot of flexibility beyond the massing. I don't think MSBA approved the massing model. They approved the overall budget, the enrollment, and the fact of a rebuild rather than a renovation. I don't know how much space there is around it beyond that. But we don't need to lose any votes. And just putting my finger in the air, aside from the financial shock, the sticker shock, there is just a lot of attachment. I wouldn't even call it historic. It's an emotional, iconic streetscape that people are used to. People love driving by it. People love looking at it. My apologies in advance, but I got to chuckle a little bit at a row of columns on the sidewalk. Sorry, that didn't cut it. That's not preservation. So, I really just want to emphasize, let's find a win-win. Let's be creative. And frankly, coming back in October with a done deal that nobody likes doesn't really help. I don't know if there's a way to process it, but there's all these architects here, and I know some have a lot of experience in preservation and open spaces and things like that. Can we utilize this resource to like get some fresh air into the process and come up with some great ideas? Nobody wants a Best Buy sitting on Mass Ave. These funny angles and curved things, I don't know. Personally, they don't look New England to me. But I'm looking for the win-win. I'm challenging everyone to come up with a win-win. We don't want to lose a single vote. We want the debt exclusion to pass so we can have the great educational program. Without the debt exclusion, it's back to square one, and nobody wants that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian Hasbrook. I don't have a question about the broad stroke politics of this. I know it's really big, preservation, open space, you know, there's a lot of discussion there. I'd like to go back to a detail about the site plan. I understand now that we're really reorienting the drop-off and pickup to the back of the building, and I can see how there are a lot of advantages about that. And I wonder if you could talk to the question, how much of this is dependent on developing the road that goes out to Grove Street? Right now, it's just, there's a barricade there and there's a steep hill. And does the plan that you have there anticipate that that road will be developed out to Grove so you'll be able to have a straight cut through then from Mill all the way over to Grove?
So at this time, we're looking at that. It doesn't anticipate it, but we're looking at it just to see the pros and cons. At minimum, there'll be a maintained pedestrian bicycle connection from Grove Street. So the analysis is still going on, so stay tuned. Thank you.
Okay, we said we'd stop at 9 o'clock, so we're going to stop at 9 o'clock.
It's 8:58, Jeff.
We're going to stop at 9 o'clock, but members of the building committee are throughout the room, and you can ask them questions if you like. You can also come and talk to other people who are on the building committee, who are with the professional design team. Thank you very much for coming. Our next forum is October 24th. We hope to see you there. And the building committee meets on October 2nd, Tuesday, October 2nd.